What's up, everyone? Let's get this party started. So I wanted to do a market update because I haven't done one in a while. Let's take a look first at the coin market cap levels, kind of where we're at, what it's looking like. So fear and greed has gone to extreme greed. We're topping out up here. We're pretty high up. I mean, it's steadily crept up. We were at like 86 the other day. Now we're up to 92. So it's getting pretty high up on there. I don't think we're quite euphoric yet, but we are getting pretty. I mean, you can see it every time we go try to go near the all-time high, we all of a sudden liquidate like everybody, longs and shorts, because everybody's trying to 100x the next big break. And ultimately that should teach us that probably not the best strategy, because that's how ultimately all of these people get liquidated. But when we look at the last 7 days in the market, Bitcoin's down a little bit today. We had the consumer price, the CPI index come out, consumer price index, and it was bearish. Didn't hurt BTC right away, but it did later on. It also hurt stocks later on. But with that being said, in the last 7 days, it has been overly bullish. There's no reason to be bearish at this point. There's no indicators that we should be bearish or that anything bad's happening. We're at 71,000. We're holding here. We wicked off of the previous high. So ultimately, it looks decent. I mean, we could see a little bit of a decline or a dump, but I don't think we're seeing anything crazy just yet. So look at Bitcoin, 7 days, we're up 11%. ETH is up 12%. We've got BNB up 37%. It's been on a tear. Solana is up 21%. I posted on my Twitter about the Solana breakout that it was coming soon. And if you're not following me on Twitter, make sure you go to twitter.com/Chandler SAF and follow me over there because I show a lot of my charts and breakouts on there. But across the board, everything's looking pretty good. AVAX is starting to really break out and look good. The old red coin, Polkadot even. I don't even know what Toncoin is. We've got Matic looking good. We've got Near Protocol just up an astronomical amount. So, I mean, the market looks good. Even Litecoin was at $100. I was shocked to see Litecoin actually mooning. Across the board, Injective finally moving. I posted the breakout when we hit like, I think we broke like 38 or something like that. Now we're at 50. So we're 39% up on the day. So everything's looking overall good. Render up 66% over 7 days. Render's doing really well. So overall, there's nothing to be bearish about. The graph doesn't get enough attention, but it's up 59%. Indexing data protocol. That's why it's so popular. And it looks good overall. So market to me looks pretty good. Everything's doing well. Obviously, the last day or so, it's down. This is like when we had the bear market of March 5th. So they don't last very long. When we look at sort of where, I mean, what I've noticed is stocks right now have been sort of like sideways while crypto's mooning, which tells you that money is in crypto and not stocks right now. The stock market hasn't been great. It was good until crypto started really mooning and breaking out and killing things. But overall, when we look at the SPY, it's kind of it's been super choppy. So you can see it's all over the place. It's still up and it's still making highs and stuff like that, but it's super choppy. Even looking at the RSI, it's like all over the place with bear divs everywhere. When we look at the weekly, sort of the same thing. We had a really nice reset here that just took us obviously to Valhalla. And it's been a really interesting market lately. Same thing with QQQ. This one's starting to potentially build some bear divs out, which would be not good for the indexes because you can see like here we had the top here and then we had this little reset and then we pushed hard out of that, but we still haven't really been able to clear this. We really haven't been able to get anywhere. It's been super choppy. So I think the only things to really pay attention to are NVIDIA is obviously just up only. NVIDIA is just, it's going to hit 1,000. That's pretty much the logical place for it to go. AMD follows NVIDIA. So it typically follows where NVIDIA goes. ARM as well. They don't look as good. Tesla's just been an absolute piece of shit. I don't understand why anybody buys this coin. Maybe you could DCA in it, or this stock, it's just, I mean, it was great from about January 2023 till July. And then all of a sudden now it's just, ever since July, it's just down only. And so at this point, I think it's just hope and pray that this thing, I mean, hope and pray that this thing's next stop is 150. That'd be my target for Tesla right now. But I just don't think it has a lot going for it. When we look at the stocks to pay attention to, though, they're the crypto stocks, the BTC ETFs. I bought IBIT back when it was like $26. And it's just been up only. So my entry was like right here. It looks good. So pay attention to these. This is BlackRock's. That's kind of what I jumped into because I figured it would have the highest volume. It would probably be the most successful one. All of those are out down on the day because obviously Bitcoin's been down on the day. But when we look at crypto stocks, Coinbase has just been on a tear. I bought Coinbase at like $85 because I knew as soon as Bitcoin starts going, Coinbase was going to go too. And that's exactly where it's headed. It looks like Coinbase, once it gets past this little chop zone here at like 267 to like 281, there's nothing stopping it from like the 350 plus, like getting it back up to that IPO price, which could probably happen. Same thing with Hood. They've recognized that they need to focus on crypto. And so you can see this beautiful little bear market that Robinhood was in for a long time, and now it's broken out. So now that puts Robinhood on the trajectory up here to like the probably like the 30s before we see some meaningful stoppage, like 35. So it has quite a bit of ways to go when you look at where that's at. We've got MicroStrategy just literally up only. MicroStrategy usually outperforms Bitcoin. So it's another thing to pay attention to and to really look at because this one, because Saylor's such a saint in the crypto world, it's another one to pay attention to. But let's kind of take a look at crypto itself. And if you have questions, oh, let me share. Sorry, guys. Gosh dang it. I do all that and then I don't share. Okay. Can y'all see now? Let me know in the comments. I think I fixed it. Okay. So just pretend like you saw what was just happening. And now let's go into the actual market. So I just went over MicroStrategy, kind of showing just MicroStrategy. If you zoom out, you can just see week over week, MicroStrategy just gaps up ever since like February 20th. It's just been straight up, straight up, straight up. It's just gone ballistic. MicroStrategy often outperforms Bitcoin. So it's something interesting to pay attention to. We kind of look at the EMAs. If I was trying to get into MicroStrategy right now, typically good entries for this one are whenever it hits this 4-hour trend. So it's like the EMA 13 and EMA 21. Every time it hits that, it bounces off pretty well. So hit bounce. So those tend to be decent entries. We could potentially see a broader pullback, but ultimately MicroStrategy's been up only. So I think a good entries, good DCA is like hitting that 4-hour trend. When we break that, that probably sends us down here. So that could be a potentially great entry when it does happen. When we look at Bitcoin right now, it's been dumping on the day. I don't think it's done dumping for the day. It had a great wick today, right off of this previous high zone. But ultimately after that beautiful wick that just recovered everything, it came right back down. So now in my opinion, it's tough to say right here. But what I think is going to happen, you can see the RSI starting to peel over. We're going to come back down to this 50 level and see if we can bounce off of it to just like we did over here in the great bear market of March 5th. So we had it here, we bounced, we hit the 50 and we drove straight through and then that pushed us back. But now we're starting to peel back over. So I think we're going to hit that 50 again. Potentially that puts us in daily trend testing zone. So if we can't recover this, if the daily starts peeling down too, then that puts us in a zone to where we probably come back down and test like 66,187 or 62,768, somewhere between there. When you look at that in the past, when we had the great bear market of March 5th, we hit the daily and then we bounced off hard and pushed. Same thing over here. When we went sideways, everyone was like, oh my God, it's bearish, we're all going to die. And then we hit the daily and then we pushed hard. So that's what we want to pay attention to. Every time we hit that daily, we push pretty hard and ultimately drive back up. Same thing over here. We kind of push through, we retest it, and then bounce pretty hard off of it. So I think that could be a potential scenario where we're coming into. The other thing that I started to map out that could be a big resistance zone, because I think at this point, like we've cleared the previous all-time high. And so at this point, we've kind of liquidated all the 100x longers and shorters who are trying to kill the breakout. They've been liquidated off this thing as well. So now we're kind of sitting here above the all-time high. Good news is we haven't just teleported straight back down and just annihilated this candle. So I think that's a pretty good sign. When we look at where we're headed next, what I think makes sense for us is coming up into like the 77,500. So if we're able to close, like when we look at, sometimes all you have to do is zoom out to see how bullish this really looks. Like you zoom out and you're like, okay, a little bit of sideways and then up only. There hasn't been anything that's ultimately like wrecked us. And so from where we're at, what I think could potentially happen is where the 3 days good, we look fine. We could we look like we have a little bit more downside action on the daily. Like I was saying, we could potentially come back down and retest this 66,231 zone. But ultimately, as long as that holds, and if this doesn't hold, then we obviously have a much bigger pullback we have to pay attention to. We're probably coming back down to the 55s. But with that holding, I think our next stop on looking at the 3-day chart, our next stop is coming up here to the like 77,000 zone. I think that'll be the next big pivotal resistance. You could even see and this is interesting because in the past we come up and we hit this and we'd come right back down and bounce off this and push through. But now what seems to happen is we come up and we hit these resistance zones and we just sit sideways and then we push through. So it'll be interesting to see if we come up, we sit sideways, and then we push through because the next target beyond this one ends up being the 102,000 range, 102,239. And so if we are able to go sideways and then push through, we're gonna have probably a pretty big grind. As soon as we hit that 100,000 zone, there's probably gonna be a massive sell wall just because it's a nice round number. So once we hit that, that puts us in this zone, and ultimately, I think that's our first big. I would venture to say that we probably have our first big correction somewhere between like this 102 and like this 127 zone, which would probably be about a 30% correction that we'd see, just because previously, when we looked in the past, what's happened, let me remove some of this and add something. When we look at the pi cycle indicator, it tends to be pretty useful in being able to sort of see where Bitcoin's going, where it's headed, and ultimately what's happened. So one thing we've been stuck under has been this top in area of this pi cycle indicator. So when we look at the daily, notice how we were stuck under this, pushed, fell through, rejected, pushed through, retested, used it as support. So that's kind of where we're at now. We've actually utilized this as support. So what could happen now? Well, now we could probably go sideways, test it again, have a double bounce off support. What's interesting about the past, and let me know if there's any questions so far. Let me check these. Finally, yeah. Hooray. God, there's nothing worse. The only thing worse is that being muted and talking for 20 minutes. So one thing that's been interesting in the past, though, with this pi cycle indicator is it's been a fairly reliable predictor of where the tops are and ultimately where Bitcoin's. There we go. I was like, my chart won't come through. But when we look at the past, let's say, so a good spot to look at would be November 20th, 2020, because that kind of put us into the 2017 bull run. So notice how in this bull run or this pre-bull run zone, we were stuck and we got rejected, fell through 1-day bear markets or so right here. Then we rejected again, came back down, and then we pushed through. It pushed the candle, then it came back through and tested, didn't quite touch it, but tested and then pushed and then came back down for a retest and then pushed and then kind of got sideways here and stuck and then ultimately pushed through. But what was interesting about that phase of the cycle was the fact that we actually pushed off right here. Let's call it 21,365. What that did was that kind of initiated the parabolic phase of the bull rally. So before that, it was kind of up only from here. It was like 10,000 up to about 19. But then once we cleared that, it went from that spot it was like 21,400 and 21,201. It pushed all the way up to 40,000. So it essentially doubled. And then from 40,000, it came all the way back down to about 28. So it doubled and then went through a 30% correction and then went on to go from 28,000 back up to 57. So doubled, 30% correction, and then pushed right back up to almost doubling again. So that's kind of like where things got really crazy in the bull market. When you can see here, it wasn't as volatile or as crazy until about this spot. And then when we lost this, when we pushed this though, that's when it really got crazy and started going up only. So that's something to pay attention to in terms of where we were at. And then that basically went from December 17th, 2020 till about April 14th, 2021. And then we had the little mid-scale correction here and then back up here in November 9th, 2021. So potentially could see a scenario like that in the past when it's actually rejected off of this pi cycle indicator. What happens is it goes through a full-scale correction right back down to the bottom range, which ends up being about a 30% correction. So when we look at where we're at now in terms of where all this stuff is, if we were to reject off of this right now, which I don't think it's a likely scenario, the fact that we actually notice how we actually pushed through, we pushed, came back through, retested. Now, this isn't the greatest candle. I think we've got some more room to the, I think this is either going to be sideways or we're going to come back down and test that fairly quickly. It doesn't seem to want to hold very well because when I go back and look at the 4 hour EMAs, we're 100% not holding this very well. So what happens now? Well, from what I can see, we push through, off that. We're going to come back down. We're going to fall right through again. And there could be a potential where we fall through and we wick off of this and then we push, and hopefully that doesn't act as resistance. So ultimately, like I said, I think we're either going to, we're beyond the US stock market hours in a couple of minutes, but I think what's going to happen is this is going to become a sticky zone, and then it's going to end up being stuck here, come through, bounce, stuck here, come through. It's just going to do this for a minute. And we won't really know the answer until the stock market opens because Bitcoin's volume is during the stock market hours now. But I think ultimately the fact that we were able to clear this and retest successfully, and if we can hold that, if we don't collapse by the end of day today, that's a pretty nice retest. If we can hold this on the weekly, it's a beautiful retest. It means that we're probably in a pretty good zone to start really phasing. But also what could happen is from here, we push to 77 and we push back down to retest, and then we push back up. So something to pay attention to in that zone. In terms of if we did have a rejection off of this zone, it would be pretty nasty. We would be looking at, and I'm not saying this is a likely scenario. I think we seem strong, and I don't see any indicators that we're ready to die just yet, but that would put us back down in like the 46, 45 zone in terms of a correction. So from 70 to 45 would be in terms of what we've seen so far on this market, that would be a pretty big correction for where we're at. So it's kind of what Bitcoin looks like. ETH, the pi cycle doesn't work at all for ETH, so you shouldn't even look at it. Don't even pay attention to it. But in terms of where ETH is at, ETH is looking good. So we've got ETH. It's been riding the daily trend straight up. We only tested once, just like Bitcoin. High was 4,000. We finally broke this zone. ETH looks good on the weekly. It's just like Bitcoin. It's been up only. People ignore it, or kind of call it an underperformer, but it's just every week since January 29th, it's just been up only for ETH. So it's actually been on a really good rally. And when we often talk about ETH, it goes like this, like slow teleport. And so my next target for ETH, it would be around 4,200. And then I'm looking at like 48. So we're kind of moving into the all-time high territory for ETH, which we could see, which could potentially happen if Bitcoin starts going sideways right here and just doesn't move for a while. We could potentially see ETH and the alt start to really rally. Same thing with Sol. So Sol, similar thing. It's kind of got stuck right here at the 110 zone, and then now it's finally pushed through and it's pushing into that 150 zone. So I kind of watched the breakout here at like 111. We needed that. We needed this 106 to this range to break through. We finally broke through this, and it's been holding fairly well. Been holding successfully, even with Bitcoin kind of falling apart and dying on the day. It hasn't ultimately fallen apart and shown any sort of weakness. So I don't think there's a lot to say about Sol being bad. It's in a situation here where the 4 hour was starting to peak and now it's coming back through. So potentially what could happen, because it is losing its 4 hour trend here, is we could see Sol lose this, come back down, wick off this 141 zone, even potentially could see it come down here. Yeah, this 141 zone would be probably where we'd see a double bottom for Sol. And obviously there was a lot of buy activity here. So it would be interesting to see what happens off those spots. Any questions in the comments so far? If you have coins you want me to look at, let me know. But things that have been strong. So obviously Render has been really strong. So when we look at Render and where it's at, it's kind of just cooling off after just monstrous rallies. So as you can see, Render had a nice break really in the $5 zone. It started really breaking out and started this trend, pushed through, moved sideways, lost its 4 hour trend, and then pushed straight back up. Now it's kind of had this double top here. So Render's kind of cooling off. It is losing this 4 hour trend. So we could potentially see Render come back down and retest. I mean, it's fairly close right now. We could see Render come through and retest this like 1117 zone. Or if Bitcoin starts being kind of shifty, we could see it come back down to this 1039 zone. But that's ultimately what I'd be looking at for that. If I wanted to long it, I would wait till it starts seeing some stability, at least on the 4 hour. Right now, it looks like if we can bounce off here and see a really nice shift up, then I think we're in a good spot for rendered so long because that would coincide with it coming back and taking this trend again. Say has been really strong. Ever since it bounced off of this like 60 cent zone, it kind of fell straight through during Bitcoin's collapse. It's been holding this range between 93 and 86. So that's kind of what I'd be looking at. Breaking this range would be super bullish on it. Injective finally broke out. So I kind of mapped this out. We've been watching Injective. It would come up to this 43 zone and then just reject. It fell through, and that gave it the strength to really start pushing. You can kind of see the reset here. So push through, reset, straight back up. When we look at the daily, had a really nice daily reset. So almost a double reset off of that. And now we're on this daily God candle. Same thing on the 3-day, you can see this 3-day reset. As soon as those resets start happening, you can see the reset, you can see it drive, reset, boom. So it came back, it pushed through this 3-day trend and ultimately pushed through pretty hard. Same thing on the weekly, starting to look bullish. So Injective is finally breaking through. If I'm looking at Injective kind of targets, probably go to the 3-day chart, but I mean, we're in this 49 to like 55 zone. This is kind of the golden fib zone from where we're at, from the bottom of where this range was created, somewhere around the $30 zone. But ultimately, this probably puts us in the 61 zone. Once it really starts taking off, I think it might be a bit of a grind. It's going to push through. It's going to come back through and test where it broke through. And then ultimately that gives it the strength to drive back up. TIA starting to look a lot stronger. So I can see TIA, it wants to break out, but it's been shut down almost every time. But what I did like and notice is TIA's got this 3-day reset that's starting to push through. The 3-day candle closes in about 2 hours. So if it can close and this reset doesn't peel straight back down and die, then we could actually see some life back in TIA. When we look at it really doesn't have a weekly yet. When we look at the 1-day, we're starting to see it's actually cleared over on the daily. So this needs to close and then confirm. And then another daily needs to close. And we probably got a pretty decent confirmation of TIA. When we're looking at this breaker zone, we've got TIA finally clearing through this. So I would anticipate we hold up here, and then TIA, it already kind of touched here. We would come back and retest this zone and then hopefully push through. It's been really touchy with when Bitcoin moves. So notice how it did it yesterday, and then the entire candle got erased. But today it's a lot stronger. So we have the daily RSI, or the 12-hour RSI reclaim. We have the daily. So ultimately, I think TIA is positioning itself to move into its next rally after being in a sideways position for a long time. Coin I like a lot. OP moves similar to ETH. It hasn't had a lot of strength lately. Ever since this breakout from like the 390s, it's been just kind of barely hanging on by a thread. So it's something to pay attention to. It's still sitting above its daily trend. If it loses its daily trend here, we're probably looking at TIA or OP coming back down to like the 374 zone. Let's see. Let me see if there's any questions. Any questions, post them in the chat. How do you feel about AVT, the AI project? Let me see. Let me find it. Aventus, is that the one? Let me know if this is the right one. Yeah, I'll take a look at AEG too. Let's see. I'm not sure if this is the right one. If it is, let me know, but we'll take a look at this one and kind of see. Oh, coin market cap always like crashes my computer. There's too much on those screens. In terms of where it's at, I mean, it broke out of a, oh, stop this. It's destroying me. Okay. So in terms of where it's at, it's been consolidating for a bit now. It's kind of been, oh, now my computer says no way. Until this stops, we're screwed. But we finally had a nice breakout. We broke this. Mother of God, please stop loading. It's because I have 87 tabs over another screen, so it just kills me. So yeah, with where we're at, we had a nice breakout. I mean, it's been consolidating, hasn't really been able to break this 284 region really ever. So I mean, if let me see, is this the right coin? Oh yeah, I'll take a bit look at AVAX. If this is it really hasn't been able to break this 294 region since it was launched in February 5th, 2022. I don't know if this is the right coin, but this is a really good breakout. So we've got this breakout. Could potentially come back down and test the breakout zone. What I would kind of look for is continuation. It's already lost this 4 hour trend. So what I would look at for here is coming back down. It could potentially come back to this 449 zone. It looks like it's got some buying, but also rejection here. So I'd be looking at this zone. Ultimately, though, it's a decent breakout. As long as it doesn't erase the entire thing, then I'd be looking for long somewhere in this zone. If it loses this, then it's just all hope is lost. It's going to erase the entire thing. So just be careful with it. AVAX, man, what a good breakout. Let's take a look at AVAX. So we got AVAX here. What a just a beautiful breakout here. So we've had a consolidation zone, maybe about right here. Something I like to do when I look at consolidations is just make a line candle, put it on the daily and see where most of the price action happens. So we can see it's been sort of stuck, might be in that zone for a while now. Hasn't been able to break out of this range. So we can see AVAX had, and AVAX kind of follows Sol. So if you see Sol start to break out, you want to come look at AVAX too, because it'll follow. Same thing with SUI, SUI, and Say, kind of follow each other. So, but once we had this initial breakout here where AVAX went from like $12 to $49, and then we had this consolidation period, and now we finally broken out of that consolidation period. So we can see on the daily, we had the breakout, came back, retested literally everything, pushed back through, and now we've got these two God candles building. So ultimately, I think AVAX looks great. If I wasn't long in this, I hold AVAX. I bought it like during the depths of the bear market. I figured it would do well, so I bought it at like $12. But if I was looking at getting into this, or if I was looking at what is going to happen next, I would move to this 4 hour trend. And I would say, okay, it's already kind of pushed through and tested once. And now it's pushed through with a couple of good candles. I would probably expect some sideways action and a retest. So if it comes back and it retests this EMA 13 and 21, that's going to be a really good entry. You can kind of see over here with the 4 hour chart right here is where it really pushed and really had a beautiful reset. So right now, what I would be expecting is maybe some sideways action and come back to test this 4 hour. If it bounces off this 4 hour, that's going to be a beautiful entry. So the 4 hour, if we kind of got to freehand it, but probably going to be somewhere like right here and maybe right here-ish would potentially be a good entry zone. So I would kind of pay attention to that. You want these EMA bands to obviously be in this spot. That's me just eyeballing where I think it would go, but that's ultimately where I'd look at for an entry on this if I was looking at it. And I mean, if Sol runs, AVAX runs. They like I said, they run together. So I would be definitely looking for this, and I think it's a potential just banging long. Let's look at the where we could potentially go with this thing. There. So as like what we've noticed or what we can see here is we're coming up on this kind of golden fib zone. So what I would look for here, we're already kind of clearing it. So next spot stop for AVAX would be this like 59 zone. You could potentially argue the sideways action happens here, comes back and retests this zone in that 52 spot where I just mapped out. And then it bounces and probably pushes from the 60 into like the 69s. Ultimately, I think AVAX has the potential to push into like the hundreds again, hundreds. I can't remember where its previous high was, but yeah, I mean, you look at AVAX when you zoom out 147, but I think for this rally, probably expect and anticipate a push into the first zone is going to be like the 68s. We got to get through the 59s, and then we got to get through the 68s here. Then we're probably pushing into the 90s. So ultimately, I think it's good because it's going to follow, like I said, it's going to follow what Sol's doing. AVAX and Sol kind of follow each other. When one breaks out, the other typically breaks out. So when we look at Sol, we're kind of in a similar situation. So Sol's starting to break out. We've got Sol's high, which was in the 260s. So moving with AVAX in a similar way, we've got Sol 156 is my next target for it. Then we're kind of looking at the 165s and like the 187s and ultimately a big target of like 254 for Sol in the near term. AEG. Let's take a look. All right, pretty new. So we're gonna have to look at this on the 4 hour, maybe even less. Oh yeah, this is the new coin. This is how every new coin launches. Comes out with the bang, goes sideways. So pretty much what we want to pay attention to on these kinds of things. We can't really map a lot out. We don't really have a lot of data. We little bit on the hourly. We see that the hourly's kind of bounced right here. Now we're starting to see sideways action. What we want to see is this hourly on the RSI cross over 50 and then bounce and then drive. And that gives us some confidence that it has somewhere to go. Looking at this thing right now, we don't really have a ton to go off of, but we can draw a line at that wick. So we can say, okay, that's ultimately what creates blue skies for us. Then we can come out over here and say, okay, where have we touched multiple times? So, okay, maybe right here could potentially be what our top looks like. We can go into the line chart and say, okay, that looks pretty good. That's been a zone we've touched multiple times, a zone we haven't been able to clear. We have a clear area there. So then ultimately, okay, well, what do we have to do? Well, okay, on this, look at our EMA bands where we essentially barely have any EMA bands. So it's really hard to predict where this goes. But ultimately, it looks like ultimately we've lost the 50 on the RSI. So we've come all the way back down. We've seen a decent wick. So it looks like we'll get some sideways action and then a revenge push here. If on the revenge push, it's able to push past the 50 and it's able to cross over this like 0.24010 zone, then it probably starts its leg up into testing this all-time high territory. But ultimately it needs to cross this 50 and confirm and push through. And it needs to cross this line and confirm and push through. Notice over in the past, what's happened is it's pushed through, and then when testing, it starts going sideways and then just eventually loses it. So that's what we don't want to see. So what happened here? Lose it, lose it, lose it. Notice how it bounced off here on the 50, pushed through, bounced again, came through, bounced again, then really started losing strength and just died. So that's ultimately what we don't want to happen. So that's kind of what I would look for that. Mavia. Let's see. Mavia. Okay, so this one, it had a pretty good pump. And then it started consolidating. You can see this on the hourly. Let's look at it on the 4 hour. You can see that it pushed through on this 4 hour, had a great drive, ultimately topped out around here. And now we're starting to push through. We're right at the 50 on the 4 hours. So this is a pretty pivotal zone for this right now. Notice how it's testing this EMA 13 and 21 and starting to fall through. If it loses this, and if it loses the 50, it's going to come straight back down and test the 7.58 zone. Then I would anticipate, because of this wick, which obviously happened today, it would come back up and have a revenge push. And so it would straddle this 50 line. What we want to see is a really nice push straight through off of here. And we want it to hold above these two EMA bands. And then I think we have the strength for this to continue on. But right now it's on the verge of losing it, which would be a little bit sketchy to look for in a long. So what I would be looking for is, I mean, even down here, like I said, we're coming through to this like 760, 758 zone, which ultimately becomes probably a pretty good entry, just looking at where the bottom is. And essentially it would be sweeping the lows if we came back down and started looking at that zone. So that's essentially what we have. We have the 12-hour zone, which is created here. We have the lows here. We're kind of stuck in the zone. 12-hour has the potential for a turnaround. So that's good. But ultimately, I think with where we're at, we need it to hold this 4-hour trend, which it's not holding right now. It needs to hold this. And this 50 in the RSI, it needs to stay above and not straddle or fall through. And then I think it's in a pretty good spot. Ultimately, it looks like it's been a decent performer. It's not. It's good. It kind of cleared here. We cleared that 50 in the RSI, had a nice little uptrend, and now we're coming back down to sort of consolidate. We don't want it to go under here, or we can start pushing down. Then it pushes it, like I said, into the 758s, 760 zone. Worst case, probably down into 725. big thing was it broke this zone. That was the bottom that was created. And then ultimately down here was a little nasty area we don't want to go back into, or it starts really seeing new lows. What's your thoughts on AI coins? Yeah, I think AI coins are the gaming coins of this cycle. So with how strong gaming was like last cycle, AI has that mantle this cycle. The interesting thing about the AI market is there's nothing really, it's new all around. So there's nothing really to base it against. So you can't say AI crypto versus AI stocks. What's going on? Well, everything's new in terms of the AI world. And because of that, I think it's incredibly hot. It's incredibly popular. And there's so much room for these things to move. Like you look at Render. Render was like 30 cents not too long ago. But you look at Render, like Render up only. You look at FET up only. You look at AKT. All of these look really good. AGIX, Ocean, HAL, While, WorldCoin, Aleph, uh, AI. All of these are good. Like for me, just in full transparency, I have AI. So it's been great. I got into AI. I grabbed this when I saw a breakdown here in like the 130s. But I grabbed Aleph too. And I think Aleph is a really interesting data slash DPIN AI protocol. I grabbed Aleph at 9 cents. You can see my first line I drew. And then I grabbed it again at 15 cents. And then I grabbed it again at 28 cents. So I think this one has a lot of potential too. It's a tiny market cap. I think this thing's barely 100 million. So I think there's a lot of room to grow for this one. Got like OXO. Prime is a gaming plus AI coin, so it probably has a lot of potential. So I think there's a ton of room to move. I don't even think we've seen anywhere near what the AI market cap is gonna become for crypto. I mean, when we go over here, consistently hot things are memes, Solana, gaming, AI. Like if I was gonna build out the ideal portfolio, it would be Bitcoin, it would be ETH and ETH betas. Actually, let's just take a look at what my list. This is what I look at a lot. So this is like my ideal stuff. So it's Bitcoin, it's ETH, and then we have ETH, we have Sol, we have ETH betas. So OP, we have Render. For AI, we have Say, newer coin, we have Injective, we have TIA, we have STX, which is a BTC beta. So it's going to move like Bitcoin, but with a lot more upside. We have ENS, another ETH beta. We have LDO, ARB, all ETH betas. I think ARB and LDO aren't quite as good as OP. I think OP is consistently the strongest performer. So if there's one ETH beta I would pick, it would be OP. We've got a Leaf for the DPIN slash AI narrative, Pyth, which is a Sol beta. We've got Ordi, which is a meme coin on Bitcoin. Shadow, which is another Sol beta, which Shadow I think is great. I got Shadow at like 50 cents. With Sol shitcoin. PAL, we've got Filecoin, which is a or a DPIN kind of data management tool. So I think it makes sense. Jupe ends up being one of the stronger Sol betas. Notice when Sol moves, Jupe moves. Same thing with Pyth. For Alluvium, I think has a lot of potential this year. It doesn't have a huge huge diluted market cap. So I think it has the potential to move. I think Alluvium's in price discovery at this point. Magic, one of the strongest gaming coins on AVAX. We've got Big Time, which is a fairly new gaming coin. Ocean, which is a DPIN product. So ultimately, to answer your question, I think AI has a ton of room to move. I don't think it's exhausted. I think you basically have two extremes. You have memes and you have AI, which have been some of the strongest markets to be in this trend. So for me, I think it's definitely going to be one of the strongest performing subsets and segments of the market. So I think there's a lot to look up to on that one. Thoughts on meme coins? Yeah, I think it's important to have a meme coin portfolio. I mean, I have a whole section devoted to memes. I think what's going to happen, one thing that happens typically when we start getting into euphoria and when normies start coming in, they look at the coin that they think they can buy the most of. So what they're going to start doing is they're going to look at Bonk and they're going to say, oh, okay, it's all of these zeros and a two. So if Bonk goes to a penny, I could make millions. Oh, if Sheeb goes to a penny, I could make millions. Oh, if Floki goes to a penny, I could make millions. Oh, if Pepe goes to a penny. So that's kind of what normies start to look at. So you want to pay attention to that as we get deep into the bull cycle. So they're going to look Whiff, which I think Whiff's a great performer, but they're going to say, oh, $2, well, I could get way more Bonk. It makes 0 sense. But that's kind of how normies look at it. So you want to think about it in that potential. The other thing that I'm noticing that has been a trend in this market is dog versus cat coins. And so right now, just strength overall, Whiff looks like it wants to challenge this 4 hour to start moving in another trend. It looks like Bonk is losing its trend. So Bonk isn't in the best position. Doge is kind of like the Bitcoin of memes. So if Doge moves, memes move. Sheeb looks the same. So notice how Bonk, Doge, Sheeb all look the same. WIF has a lot of people talking about it as like the Las Vegas Sphere thing, but everything else kind of looks the same. Flocky looks decent. Pepe isn't a dog coin, but it still looks somewhat similar. I think meme has a lot of potential because it actually has some legitimacy behind the project creators. When I think will be a really good one on the Solana chain. So it's kind of like the OG, not the OG, but it's like the biggest quote unquote Solana coin or Solana meme coin since it got airdropped based off of the Jupe thing. I think Popcat is really good. I bought Popcat at 6 cents, but it's been good. I think that one has a lot of potential. It's another cat coin. Like I said, it's going to be dogs with Bonk, obviously Doge, Sheeb, Flocky, and Pepe against like cat coins. So we've got Popcat, we've got Mog, we've got Smurf Cat. So I've noticed the trend is cat, but I've noticed the biggest performers in terms of the cat coins are typically when Popcat does really well. Mog seems to do really well. I think Toshi, I can't remember, but Toshi's over on base. So it's a newer one. I think Spell's kind of a meme. And the reason I think Spell will be popular is just because it sounds cool. It's available on Coinbase and people think they can get a lot more for it. Over on AVAX, I think Kakinu is the king. I bought Kakinu, gosh, on this one. It was like 513. I bought it back here. And then I bought it again after the accumulation period right here. But I think Hakinu has the chicken coin has a lot of room to go in terms of shit coins. But ultimately, I think it's important. I think we'll probably have a bit of a shitcoin blow off top in the next month or so. And when we get really deep in hysteria, these things go absolutely insane. It'll be, you won't even be able to fathom what it looks like when these things start going into hysteria, just because normies will start buying it. People start going crazy. It's out of control. So I think these meme coins have a lot of potential. And like I said, it's dogs versus cats right now. Another thing to pay attention to as we go into the US election year, some of those like the Trump coin will probably do pretty well just because it's going to have a lot of headlines and a lot of things going on. So pay attention to that stuff too. I think in terms of having a good portfolio, memes have to be part of it. And you kind of have to choose which memes. For me, it's going to be the memes that have the most zeros, just because I think normies look at that and they say, well, if I buy all of these Shiba coins and it gets 1 cent, then I can have $1 million. So they think they're logically doing something that for us makes no sense. What are your thoughts on AI coins? Yeah. What do you think about RWAs? They will have their share in this bull market. Real world assets? I think so. It's hard to tell. Right now, the new hotness is meme coins. Real world assets, I think, have a lot of legitimacy, but you have to remember this market isn't about legitimacy. It's not about like what does things. It's about what can make people the most money and what runs the most into euphoria. And so that's why we're seeing AI pop so hard, because AI is euphoric right now. It's euphoric in the stock market. Nvidia's just absolutely insane, straight up. And then you've got meme coins, which start going euphoric. So you have to remember it's less about utility in the bull market and more about what's hot, what's hype, and what are people interested in buying. So when you look at real world assets, you have to say, okay, well, is this hot? Is this something in the actual world that people are interested in right now? Is it something people are talking about? Could it be a competitor to match like AI? Probably not. It doesn't mean you shouldn't invest in it. It just means it might not be as hot as some of these other categories. And when you look at the hottest categories, it's like I said, my perfect portfolio, and you don't have to like shift your assets around and do all kinds of stuff and move all over the place. You just have to, I think you have to have Bitcoin and some of the Bitcoin betas, and then you have to have ETH and some of the ETH betas, Sol and some of the Sol betas, a gaming portfolio. You have to have AI coins and memes. And then I think ultimately you're set up for pretty good success in the bull market. And that's all I do. Like when you look at the buy list that I have, I don't have my memes in there, but with the buy list that I have, it's exactly what I just said. It's a list of everything that I accumulate during the length of the bull market and that I will hold as a normal portfolio, with some meme stocked in there. So I think that's probably the best way to tackle it. And if RWAs end up being part of that, and you could actually call Matic, which is actually one of the bigger holdings that I have, you could call Matic the real world asset chain. It's like what Starbucks and all of these big companies are using. And I think Matic will do incredibly well. So that could be another potential thing. Like, are real world assets going to be able to buy the hype, essentially buy the attention? And that's what we need. Actually, look at SNX. Geez, looks great. Hopefully that helps. Let me know. And I'm not saying they're not going to do well. Like this is the big thing. Like everything's going to do well in the bull market. Everybody in here is talking about what to buy. You have to do this, you have to do that. All you have to do is just be like, be dumb and press the green button and don't hold it to zero. And that's what's going to win. Like everything's going to perform. There's nothing in a bull market that's not. You can go into AI, you can go dumpster diving into something that doesn't even exist. It has like a $1,000 market cap, and that thing will go up too. And that's the thing about the bull market. People will buy everything. Everything will move. Real world assets will move. They'll perform. Everything will perform. Things like AI are probably going to be the bigger performers. You have things up 95% in this category, things up 67%. 60, like look at this category. It's insane. So you have to remember that these kinds of things get incredibly euphoric and out of control. It doesn't mean that RWAs won't perform. It just means maybe they won't perform as hard as AI. Am I going to dump some before an NVIDIA conference soon? No, probably not. I'm not in the position to where I just want to dump and buy. Uh, my spot holds. Like if I'm in leverage, I'll shut out my leverage before any big events happen so I don't get in trouble or lose money. But in terms of my spot holds, I'm not selling anything. I mean, I'm just going to sit comfy in my spot holds. I'm not going to worry about events. I'm not going to worry about trying to buy and sell at different times. With me, with spot, I buy when it breaks out and then I wait while it consolidates. When I see the next breakout, I buy. So a good example of this is what I did with Injective a few times. Actually, pretty much everything. This is my style. But okay, let's take Render as an example. God, let me turn the coin to market cap off. It's literally the worst. If we crash, it's coin market cap's fault. So for me, I don't really focus on, I'm not interested in trying to buy and sell. I'm interested in buying and then getting out incrementally once I start seeing Bitcoin start to pop out. But we can see like Render, I first started really diving into it around like the $3 zone. So I see it start to break through here. We push through. I see it push up to the next resistance, bounce. Okay, buy in right here. Then I wait. I see it break through here. I see it test. I see it reset. So most people would look at this on the daily and be like, "Oh no, it's already gone. I guess I just won't buy this." In a bull market, this works. In a bear market, this will not work. But in a bull market, you wait, pressure, 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 bounce off the daily trend, push through, pressure, 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 bounce off the daily trend, finally push through, come back, retest, buy on that retest. And when that holds, now because of that, it puts us in the next consolidation zone. So the next consolidation zone for me is like, it wasn't a very long one, but it's right here. So then it's like, okay, pressure, 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 wait, okay, bounce off the daily, perfect, push, fail, push, fail, push, fail, really fail, push hard. Okay, buy. I mean, I bought this somewhere right here, but I saw it push through and I saw this momentum and I saw the volume and I bought here. So I think I bought it like again at like 787 and that pushed us up here into like this $12 zone. So my average is now like $5.30 on Render, but because I waited for the pressure, I waited for the buy. And then if we get another push down at the conference and sell the news event, then I'll just buy again. But I'm not really interested in the bull market and doing that with my spot holds. For me, it's accumulating and then being able to ladder out once I start to see Bitcoin start to top out. Yeah, exactly. RWA is like it makes sense because there's a lot of potential and there's a lot. Obviously, they do great things and they have actual utility and application, but that's not what this is about. Like the crypto market is about greed. It's 100% about greed. The people in this market are here to make money and they're here to essentially dump on each other and get out before the next person gets out, so then they can make money. It's greed, and how far can greed take us? And what is going to be the thing that is the most greedy that people are going to want to get their hands on? It's going to be what's popular. Memes. It seems like Bitcoin betas are really popular. Obviously, ETH and ETH betas, Sol AI is really popular. So you got to recognize and pay attention to those metas, and then some of the new layer ones that are popping through. Let me know if there's any other questions. ultimately the market's in a good place. I think I'm gonna shut down if there's no other questions. Thanks for joining me. If you guys found this valuable, just go retweet the tweet I put on Twitter, or if you're in the Discords, just give me some fire Elmos. And if you ever want me to look at something before a stream, I'm gonna start doing these on Tuesdays again around this time. Just let me know what you want me to look at, and I'll put it on the list for the stream. But that's it. That's pretty much all I've got to say. It's a few of you watching. Appreciate y'all. Make sure you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. So YouTube says like, wow, this guy has a great broadcast. People liked it. So that way it helps me out too. And that's it. Last minute questions before we shut down. Let me know. But with that being said, it's been real. It's been fun. And it's been real fun. All right. I will talk to you all next week. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for joining me.